Hello everyone, my name is Martina Franzini and I am a second year student of the Master in Italian Studies at Boston College. And today we are here to talk about Inferno 32.
Hello everyone, I'm Giulia Wilkins. I'm in the same program in Boston College and we're glad to be here.
Okay, so we can begin by briefly recalling where we are in the Commedia to better understand the context of Canto 32. The preceding canto, so Canto 31, marks the passage of Dante and Virgil between the 8th and 9th circle of hell. We are here in the final part of Inferno. Dante and Virgil have almost finished their journey, and in fact, we are now in the last circle of hell. Let's talk a little about the structure of the 9th circle. That is, as we were saying, the one in which Dante arrives in Canto 32, and that we will find also in Cantos 33 and 34. In this circle, we find the scene of treachery. This scene is the most serious for Dante, because like the souls of the 8th circle, these sinners are those who have betrayed people who trusted them. So fraud is, in Dante's perspective, the most despicable sin of all, because it affects human intelligence. It's a wrong way to use reason. So fraud, as Virgil explains in the moral classification of the lower hell, it does in Canto 11, becomes even more serious when it is committed against people who are linked by strong ties, such as family or friendship ties or a common homeland. The 9th circle of hell is described as a huge frozen lake. The lake is formed by the fourth of the infernal rivers, Cocytus or Cocito in Italian, which freezes in this area because of the cold wind created by the flapping of Lucifer's wings. This is a beautiful image that Dante creates here. Cocytus River, in fact, was already present in the Greek tradition, but in Dante's conception, it is described as a frozen lake. So this is one of his inventions. This lake is divided into 4 areas in which we find 4 different types of betrayal. In Canto 32, there are the first 2 groups of sinners. First, we have traitors of family, and then we have political traitors, which, as we said before, are the worst sinners for Dante. And this also connects to the question of which language to use to describe this serious situation. Giulia, would you like to introduce this topic?
Absolutely. I would like to start talking about language, saying that, of course, this is one of the peculiarities of this canto, the language used. Here, Dante, the poet, gives us a new premium. As Martina said, we're getting closer and closer to the final encounter with Lucifer, and this asks for a new premium, in which Dante invokes the muses and calls for the ineffability of the language. Dante, in fact, begins to wonder if he'll be able to describe what surrounds him and to find the right words to describe the degradation, the wickedness that lives in the circle of traitors. Now, let's read together the first line of this canto. Se io avessi le rime aspre e chiocce. Because of this ineffabilità, the ineffability of words, meaning the impossibility to express something in human, now we can see it's caused by the cruelty of being close to Lucifer. After, while we're in the paradise, we'll see that it will be caused by the proximity to God. Dante here in this new premio, as we said, invokes the muses. So let's read together lines 10-12. Ma quelle donne aiutino il mio verso che aiutarono Fiona a chiuder Tebe, sicché dal fatto il dir non sia diverso. The evocation to the muses, it is an evident reference to the classic epic, a recurring topos of ancient poets who ask the protectors of arts to help them in their enterprise to find the right words. Dante therefore admits that he does not possess these words and invokes the same muses who helped once the poet Inferno when he induced, with his poetry, the stones to descend from the mountain and surround the walls of Thebes. It is not surprising that in this invocation of the Muses, Dante takes as example Thebes, a city remembered for its cruelty, for the most terrible and inhuman events. We can remember, for example, Oedipus, who laid with his own mother, or the brothers Eteocle and Polynice, who killed each other. But let's go back to the first line, the one that opens this canto. Si avessi le rime aspre e chiocce. The rhymes that, as we know from the fourth book of the Convivio, means actually poetic speech, are questioned here because, as we already said, the Dante language is powerless in the face of what goes beyond all human limits. Dante defined these rhymes as aspre and chiocce. The spiritus indicates the difficulty of the sound, while chiocce is the strident or inhuman sound. Moreover, the adjective aspre recalls the rime petrose, in particular, così nel mio parlar voglio essere aspro, in which the adjective aspro means exactly the hardness, and here it is understood as the hardness of humanity. With these two adjectives as the opening of this canto, Dante anticipates what we'll see later in the story.
Yes, and actually, there is a very interesting point here. The theme of which language to use is fundamental for this canto, of course. So we know how much Dante feels contempt for the sinners. So that's why he has to find a way to express this feeling that he has in a good way. There seems to be a certain struggle at the beginning here. So if you think about it, this is certainly something very current even today. It happens to everyone to think that they do not have the right means to complete a task, for example. We are talking here about something that can happen in any situation in our lives, even nowadays. So we can identify with this sense of struggle that he has. And personally, I think it's something incredibly relevant during the pandemic we are living in. The idea of not being able to make it and the idea of having to ask for someone else's help, like he does here with the muses. Do you agree with this?
Totally. The language is like the main point here. And if we want to go back to it a little bit more specifically, for sure, when we analyze the language, we can see how in difficult times, as you just said, we struggle. We struggle to find the right words, to express ourselves. Mainly during this unprecedented time with the pandemic, we witness how people have difficulties talking about what they're going through, their feelings. Same happens with Dante, who is facing all this pain and the fear of traveling through hell. But the poet teaches us a very important lesson to start new. He writes a new premium and he tries not to let himself overwhelmed by what surrounds him, but to find his words. But let's move on from the language. Martina, would you like to start by introducing who are the characters we actually meet along with Dante the Pilgrim?
Yes. Let's talk now about the Traitors of family, which are the first group of souls we meet in this canto. The first zone is called Caina, and it takes the name from Cain. So obviously, this is a biblical reference to the story of Cain, who killed his brother Abel out of jealousy. These sinners are completely immersed in the ice, with the only exception of the head. Their faces are turned downwards, and they express great suffering through the continuous chattering of their teeth. The contrappasso here is very simple, but perhaps not so clear. There is a strong opposition between the images of fire and ice. So, just as fire is a sign of love and charity, ice represents hatred and the coldness of their actions. What is striking in this passage is Dante's strong contempt for these souls. In other circles of Inferno, the pilgrim was almost moved by the cruelty of the punishments, while here there is absolutely nothing of this. There is only a strong condemnation for the sin they have done. So here we have the theme of the inhumanity of traitors who, through metaphors or references, are compared to animals. The souls of traitors are so despicable that, according to what Dante says, they did not even deserve to be born humans, but rather animals. The reason for this is that, as we said before, these souls have not been able to properly use this precious gift of the intellect. So that's why they deserve to be animals instead of humans. To better describe this image, the poet uses various similitudes with animals. First of all, souls are compared to frogs, which are completely immersed in water, with the only exception of the head. And then there is another beautiful example. Sinners here are compared to the storks for their way of chattering their teeth. So the traitors of the relatives are the first group of souls we meet here. It is obvious that they are somehow important to Dante and that he wants to make it clear from the beginning that they are very bad traitors. In fact, even here we can move the discussion to the present day. I find the idea of the traitors of the relatives to be something extremely contemporary, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think it's important for everyone to have the support of our family and friends, and even more so during the pandemic and these difficult times, as we already said, we're living in. For this reason, we can really understand Dante's contempt for these traitors. Surely, families' ties are the strongest and the most important. So, to betray them, it is a strong sin. Personally, I cannot even imagine how difficult it can be to overcome difficulties times like today without the help of the people who love us around us. So, we do understand the strong condemnation of Dante. Um, okay, but so now let's go back to the details about the sinners that we are encountering here along with Dante the Pilgrim. The first two characters we meet here are the Earls of Mangona, the brothers Napoleon, who was a Ghibelline, and Alexander was actually a Guelph. They descended from the noble Florentine family who owned various castles, and the two brothers, divided by political trade, clashed violently around 1282 and killed each other. Dante represents them with them in the eyes facing each other, so close that their hair gets mixed. To make their name, it's actually another sinner, Alberto Camicione, also a Ghibelline, who traitorously killed, as we saw before, his relative Ubertino to possess his territories. Camicione once again indicates the presence of other sinners, such as Modred, son of King Arthur, who, according to the Breton cycle, he tried to assassinate his father, but was killed by him with a spear bow. Here we can see the greatness of Dante, who in just one line summarized the whole story. We can read together, a cui fu rotto il petto e l'ombra, con esso un colpo per la mandartù. Lastly, Camicione introduced the Antenora, a place where the political traitors are guilty of even more serious sins. Martina, could you help us understand better the Antenora?
Yes. In the second part of the canto, we arrive at the second area of Cocytus, which is called Antenora. It takes its name from Antenor, a character from Greek mythology. There are different legends about him. According to Homer's version in the Iliad, he was a truly wise man. It is interesting instead how here it becomes the symbol of the political traitors. This is because, according to a widespread legend in the Middle Ages, this character betrayed the city of Troy. The political traitors are in this canto and in the next one, and their contrappasso is similar to the one of the traitors that we saw before. So again, they are completely immersed in the icy lake of Cocytus. The only difference in this case is that their heads are facing up. While Dante and Virgil are walking, the pilgrim accidentally hits the head of a soul with his foot. The sinner begins to cry and to yell at Dante. At this moment, we do not know who this soul is, We only know that he turns to Dante saying that if he has not come to avenge the betrayal of the Battle of Montaperti, he invites him to leave him alone. So Dante wants to understand who the soul is and asks for his name, but the sinner refuses. An important thing that we can notice in this canto is how these sinners who have committed the worst sin of all refuse to reveal their identity. They do not want, of course, to admit their guilt again. At this point, Dante seems to lose his temper and gets very physical here, grabbing the sinner by the neck first and then by the hair. In my opinion, political traitors are something even more relevant nowadays than the group of sinners we meet in the first part of the canto. If we think about it, if we think about politics today, what could be more up to date than this, right? So, the idea of changing political parties, changing ideas, or disappointing the voters. It's amazing to read a work from the Middle Ages and be able to find a clear, almost clear correspondence to the present time.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the image of Dante grabbing Bocca by the hair, it is so surprising and so powerful. And sometimes it could even makes us like smile for how graphic it is. But it is definitely something that we can identify with. To a certain limit, of course. Dante shows his anger, he's expressing physically against Bocca, and he's driven by his ideology, what he thinks. Somehow it is similar to the political disagreement that there is nowadays in certain cases. There is an idea of being able to express the freedom of speech, express our discontent. Obviously, we can't really be like physical, but we can use like media, social medias or peaceful protests. So I think it is relevant. But now let's go back and talk about this trader, Bocca. At first, Dante, as Martina already told us, doesn't know his name, and this is where Boso de Duera comes in and reveals the name of Bocca. The physical violence used by Dante against the sinner is given by the suspicions that the pilgrim had on the identity of the traitor. Bocca degli Abbati was in fact a Florentine man on the Guelph side who fought in the Battle of Montaperti. In this battle dated 1260, the Guelph of Florence were defeated by the Ghibellines. According to the chronicles of the time, Bocca, who was fighting next to Jacopo de Pazzi's banner, cut off his hand and dropped the flag of Florentine knights, causing their escape, and which turned out into a rout. This event is still an open wound for Dante, who does not preclude himself from populating this canto with his contemporaries. The narration continues, and while Dante is leaving, Bocca is the one who makes the name of other political traders who are there with him, starting exactly from Boso de Duera, the one who first revealed his name. Seems they're like still traders with each other. Wasn't there help because he betrayed Manfredi of Svevia. Bocca also indicates Tesauro de Beccaria, who beheld by the Florentine, and Tebaldo Zambrasi, who gave Faenza to the Bolognese Guelph. I think we covered pretty much all the main points of this canto. It is everything else you might like to add before we conclude this meeting?
Yes, to conclude, we can mention one last thing really important that happens at the end of the canto. So when Dante and Virgil are walking away from Bocca degli Abbati, they see two other souls imprisoned in the ice. One of them is on top of the other one and bites with his teeth the head of the soul that is below him. Dante is struck by this image. It is actually a strong image. In the next canto, we will discover that this sinner is Conte Ugolino, and his story, of course, is one of the most famous of the entire Commedia. It is interesting to see how the theme of cannibalism, which will be fundamental in relation to the figure of Ugolino, begins in this canto. Ugolino is a character who will be central in Canto 33, But it is interesting to note how he is already introduced in this canto. Canto 32 is in fact where we find the souls of the traitors of family and political traitors. And in a certain way, we can see how the figure of Ugolino contains both scenes. So this shows how often the boundary that divides the different kinds of treachery is not clear at all. For this reason, the different types of traitors are punished in the same way in Cocytus.
Well, we have seen how these traitors are the most despicable sinners. However, I believe it could be like slightly shocking, perhaps, to the modern reader, thinking that for Dantes they were the most despicable sinners. Because for us, in our modern days, we have like most terrible sins, if you allow me to say so, thieves, heretics, murderers, that actually Dante punished even less.
Yeah, and you are absolutely right about this, because of course there are objectively more severe sins. But in reality, it does not seem too difficult to understand why Dante punishes this group of sinners so strongly. They are the sinners with the frozen heart, we can say. Their actions are inhuman, they are almost like animals. And also, this topic is extremely relevant in our society because, of course, there are stronger crimes today. However, I think that all the worst actions, even today, are born, just as Dante says, from a wrong way of using reason. So just with this coldness in the soul and in the heart, as in the case of the souls that are in the frozen lake of Cocytus.
So true. Well, concluding, I do think we touch on important points of Canto 32. Thank you for staying with us and never stop reading Dante.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.